So this National TAB webinar is all about giving you the tools, timelines, and tips you'll need to put together a strong competitive application before the fall deadline sneaks up. So with that, we're just gonna get started. Next. All right, so just a quick note on logistics. If you run into any technical issues during the webinar, feel free to shoot us an email at uconn-tab@uconn.edu. We should also be putting that in the chat if you need it. We'll do our best to help you out. Also, so you know, today's session is being recorded, so we'll post that on the website afterwards in case you want to revisit anything or share it with your colleagues. Next. We'd really appreciate your feedback on today's webinar. It helps us keep improving and make these sessions as useful as possible for you. You can let us know what you thought by clicking the link in the chat. You can also head to the email address on the slide, or you can scan the QR code on the screen with your phone. It only takes a minute. We'd really love to hear your feedback. You can also do that at the end. We'll have that available, or you can pull it up as you go. Next. All right, so I'm just going to do some brief introductions with all of our amazing speakers today. With 30 plus years as a geologist, Wayne specializes in assessment and remediation. As a project manager at UConn TAB, he helps grant recipients navigate applications, site planning, budgeting, and RFPs for environmental services, turning complex projects into success stories. Carrie Martin, AICP, is the Environmental Sustainability Planner for NJIT TAB, serving EPA Regions 2 and 4. With a planning degree from Rutgers and a background in public and environmental policy, she blends big picture thinking with on-the-ground solutions to help communities plan for a cleaner, greener future. Katie leads the charge for the Mid-Atlantic TAB, bringing her expertise as a certified planner to the table. With a background in long-range planning, development review, and community engagement, she helps communities turn big ideas into actionable plans and make sure everyone has a voice in the process. My name is Roxanne Anderson. I am the KSU TAB Regional Director for EPA Region 5. I have a passion for community-driven change and have experience across state, federal, and nonprofit sectors. Cheryl Gonzalez is a senior brownfields consultant with the Center for Creative Land Recycling, serving EPA Regions 9 and 10. Before joining CClear, she led regional development efforts in Nevada as executive director of the Western Nevada Development District and served as town manager of Genoa, Nevada. She brings a passion for revitalization and a talent for turning vision into action. Next. For those of you who are not familiar to the Technical Assistance to Brownfields program, or TAB for short, TAB provides free technical help to communities, tribal nations, and public entities working on brownfield sites. Each EPA region has a TAB provider, as you can see on the map. So wherever you are, there's a team ready to help. TAB assistance can include everything from helping you prepare your grant application and doing site inventories to reviewing old site records, planning investigations, and even helping you think through cleanup and reuse strategies. And again, it's all free. Next. So just a quick look at what we'll be covering today. We'll start out with the early steps of the grant process, like figuring out which grant is the best fit for your project and what you should be thinking about before you apply. We'll go over who's eligible, the key threshold criteria you'll need to meet, and how to make sure your project scope lines up with the grant that will actually be funding it. We'll also talk about the importance of working with your community, building the right team, and what's required for specific sites. Then we'll dive into tips for writing a strong application, how to navigate grants.gov, which is always fun, and wrap things up with time for questions, hopefully. So stick with us. There's a lot of helpful information ahead. Next. All right, so I'm first. Let's get into it. Advice for getting started. This is where we'll talk through those first key steps to get you set up for success with your brownfield grant application. Next. So if you're here, you probably already know this, but just to refresh, what exactly is a brownfield? In simple terms, it's any property where redevelopment or reuse might be complicated by the possibility, not even the certainty, of contamination. That could mean hazardous substances, pollutants, or contaminants might be present. These sites can take all kinds of forms, from abandoned factories and old gas stations to former dry cleaners, shipyards, even agricultural land. The key thing is that these places often sit unused because people are unsure about what's in the soil or groundwater. And that's where most of the brownfield programs come in, is to help turn these challenges into opportunities for communities who don't have the resources to otherwise do so. Next. So one of the biggest pieces of advice we can give you is this: do as much as you can as early as you can. Brownfield grant applications can be detailed and very time consuming. And the more you can get done up front, like gathering site info, connecting with your community, lining up partners, the smoother things will go when it's time to actually write and submit. Starting early gives you time to troubleshoot, strengthen your application, and avoid the last minute scramble. Plus, some pieces, like securing site access or gathering historical records, can actually take longer than expected. So the earlier you get moving, the better your chances are of success. Next. A quick list of things to keep in mind. First, become as familiar as you can with the grant process. While workshops and webinars like this are super helpful, they shouldn't be your only source of prep. You should take time to read through the FY 2026 guidelines, check out EPA's frequently asked questions, and look at examples of successful applications. They can give you a great sense of what a strong proposal looks like. So just make sure to read through the 2026 guidelines, make sure to check out your EPA's frequently asked questions, and look at examples of successful applications. They can give you a sense of what a strong proposal looks like. We have a lot of these resources available on KSU TAB's website, as well as some of the other TAB providers' websites with examples. The TAB providers and EPA staff are here to help, so just reach out with questions, especially before the official RFA drops in September. Also, make sure to give yourself a game plan and write it out ahead of time. We can help with that as well. Build yourself a task schedule, identify the sites you might want to include, and start pulling together the information you'll need ahead of time. The more you prepare now, the less stress you'll feel later. Next. And with that, I will hand it off to Carrie Martin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roxanne. As Roxanne said before, my name is Carrie Martin, and I am with NJIT TAB, which is the TAB provider for Regions 2 and 4, 2 being the Northeast and the Caribbean, and 4 being the Southeast. Next slide. We're here today to best prepare you so that in the fall of 2025, when EPA issues its requests for applications, most of the info that you need to do a really good job is already prepared, and all you need to do is compile it into a new application format. Every fall, applicants have struggled to pull together brownfield applications in a short amount of time. There usually isn't enough time to put together a stellar application between the time that EPA announces the RFA and the due date. So today we're going to go over some things that you can and should do before the RFA is even announced. That can't just wait until September. That said, today's webinar is not a how-to webinar. Rather, we're discussing what to focus on to prepare early. And when we're done, you should, again, have that list of preparatory tasks and a good idea of the time frame. So there are many reasons why you should consider applying for EPA Brownfield Grants. First, these grants can help you restore contaminated properties, put them back into productive reuse, and reap the benefits to your community. Second, these grants can help you create jobs and stimulate economic growth. Third, they can help you improve environmental and public health outcomes. Not only can these grants help you attract private investment and complementary funding, but they can also demonstrate your community's leadership in sustainability and community redevelopment. Next slide, please. So although this webinar is intended to give applicants a head start on their applications, it's likely some of you all in our attendance are not yet certain whether or not you want to pursue a grant. The information we provide in today's webinar should help you make that decision. However, you'll probably need to spend more time to make this determination. Here are some fundamental questions you may want to answer first to help you understand whether you should pursue funding and through what grants. So first, is my organization eligible? Not all organizations are eligible for all grants, so make sure that you check all grant eligibility requirements from the previous year's RFA. Or you may not be eligible for this round of grants if, for example, you have significant unspent funds from an earlier grant. Second, do you have the organizational capacity to administer a grant? Consider what your own organization is capable of on its own, or if you need partners, particularly for assessment activities. More on that in a bit. What is your proposed target area? A target area is a cohesive district or corridor in your community where you'll be eligible to conduct your grant activities with your grant funds. Next, is there or are there eligible sites? What work is needed? Is it planning? Is it assessment, cleanup, or something else? Is there an identified end reuse for the brownfield sites? And does it meet the threshold criteria? Again, we'll discuss what the threshold criteria is more in a little bit. Next slide, please. So you must demonstrate how you will leverage EPA funds. And this is something you can work on before the fall. So you want to identify additional funding resources. So consider if you have state or local government funding and financing options. You would like to identify in-kind resources. Are there partners and stakeholders, including us technical assistance providers, who can offer their time and expertise to assist you? And you want to make sure that you've documented what resources are already committed, including other grants, loans, and private investment that's already attached to your project. Next, please. So you may be wondering, what types of EPA Brownfield grants are available, and which one should I apply for? Next. So before I go into this, I do just want to note that although our work as TAP providers is made possible with funding from the EPA, nothing said today constitutes official EPA advice, interpretations, or positions. This is informational and based on past precedent, so it is subject to change. That said, EPA Brownfield grants are known as MARC grants. This acronym MARC stands for Multipurpose Assessment Revolving Loan Fund, or RLF, and Cleanup. Note that not all grant types are offered every year. This fall, again, we don't know, but we anticipate that the EPA will accept applications for 3 types of grants: multi-purpose grants, assessment grants, which can then further be broken down into community-wide assessment grants, as well as coalition assessment grants, and cleanup grants. Next slide. So briefly, here are the eligible activities for each type of grant. A multi-purpose grant can be used for a range of planning, assessment, and cleanup. An assessment grant can be used to inventory, characterize, and assess brownfield sites, as well as to conduct planning and community engagement activities. And a cleanup grant can be used to clean up or remediate at a specific brownfield site or multiple sites that are owned by the applicant. Next slide. So multi-purpose grants are appropriate for communities that have identified through community engagement efforts a discrete area like a neighborhood, a number of neighboring towns, a district, corridor, or shared planning area or census tract with 1 or more brownfield sites. Applicants have to own the sites. They have to meet CERCLA 10139 definition of a brownfield within their target area where cleanup activities may be conducted. They have to also demonstrate how funds will result in either a phase 1, cleanup, or overall revitalization. And again, past precedent has shown us that generally for multi-purpose grants, you have to draw down at least 70% of a previous assessment or multi-purpose grant. Next. So assessment grant types can be broken down into 3 different subtypes. We have community-wide assessment, assessment coalition, and community-wide assessment for states and tribes. Next. So assessment grants can be used for a number of activities. These include site inventories, identifying past uses or current conditions, site assessment, conducting planning activities, initiating site revitalization, conducting site-specific cleanup and redevelopment planning, and conducting community involvement. Next slide. So community-wide assessment grants are appropriate for communities that are beginning to address their brownfield challenges, as well as for communities that have ongoing efforts to bring sites into productive reuse. In the past, applicants have been able to request up to $500,000 to carry out eligible activities. Next. So there are a few things to note if you'd like to pursue an assessment coalition grant. First, a lead entity partner with 2 or 4 non-lead entities that don't have capacity to apply for and manage their own grant is necessary. This lead entity must be a state, tribal, county, or local government or council or regional council that's established under federal, state, or local law. They must have at least 1 non-lead member that has never been a MARC grant recipient. So again, multipurpose assessment, RLF cleanup. And organizing a successful assessment coalition and putting into place the necessary agreements takes time. So definitely one thing you would want to do is to consider if this is the right option for you and to get partnerships going early so that you have the necessary partners in place and you're able to meet these criteria. Lastly, one criteria to note is that non-leads can't be affiliated with another non-lead. So again, you want to make sure that you are choosing your partners wisely. Next. So community-wide assessment grants for states and tribes are only available to states, federally recognized tribal nations, and eligible Native corporations in Alaska to address brownfield sites in their jurisdiction. These awards have been funded under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, as well as current EPA Brownfield grant recipients for community-wide assessment grants for states and tribes must demonstrate that at least 60% of their funds are drawn down for the current agreement have been dispersed. Again, this is the precedent set by previous awards. Next slide. So this is the anticipated timeline for the RFA, when applications are due, when awards may be announced, as well as when work plans must be submitted and grants awarded. Again, I just want to reiterate that this is not an official EPA advice, interpretations, or positions. This is not an announcement. This is just information based on past precedent that may help you to plan out and schedule how you're going to get your team together and when you might need to have certain things in place. And with that, I will kick it over to Cheryl.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm excited to be a part of this national webinar as we dive into the world of Brownfield MARC grants. I'll be focusing on eligibility and later in this webinar, community engagement. These are some of the most important pieces of the puzzle when you're applying for EPA Brownfields funding. Remember, this presentation isn't just about requirements, it's also about you developing your strategy. A well thought out strategy strengthens the application for ensuring all components, your site eligibility, your team, community support, and proposed outcomes are integrated and meet EPA expectations and hopefully exceeds them. Next slide. We want applicants eligible for EPA Brownfields grants. Oops, one more, there you go. So we'll review the applicants that are eligible for EPA Brownfields grants. This includes state, local, and tribal governments, general purpose units of local governments, regional planning councils and councils of government, development and redevelopment agencies, and nonprofits. It's important to note with regard to nonprofits, 501c4s are not eligible to apply for an EPA Brownfields grant. This is because they're primarily social welfare organizations and their lobbying activities can conflict with federal grant requirements. Also, applicants must not be the responsible party for contamination at the site. That means they cannot have caused or contributed to the contamination. If you're unsure about your eligibility, please don't hesitate to reach out to your EPA representative or consult your TAB provider. TABs are here to help you clarify your eligibility and provide technical guidance free of charge throughout your process. Next slide. Let's talk about site eligible for EPA Brownfields grants. First, the site must meet the definition of a brownfield, or the EPA must make a site-specific determination. For example, if a site was historically used for industrial purposes, but its eligibility as a brownfield is unclear, the EPA may issue a site-specific eligibility determination upon request. This can occur, for instance, for former agricultural co-op or low-threat petroleum sites. The site must not be a federal facility. However, former federal facilities that are no longer owned or operated by a federal entity may be eligible. The site must not be listed on the Superfund National Priority List, the NPL. An NPL site is one of the most contaminated sites in the country and typically requires a different type of federal oversight under Superfund law. For cleanup grants, the applicant must own the site at the time of the application. And for assessment grants, the applicant only needs to demonstrate that they have access to the site. This means having written permission or a legal agreement with the property owner, allowing you to conduct environmental assessments there. Next slide. Why do we assess site? I don't see any of the text on the slide. Okay, we're going to do them one at a time. Okay, got it. So before we review the slides, let's start with a simple answer to the question, why? Why do we assess the site? Because we want to understand the risks and conditions at a site in order to make informed reuse decisions and ensure safety, compliance, and access to funding. Let's walk through the reasons. First, to satisfy buyers, investors, or lenders, they want to understand environmental risk the environmental risk. That is part of environmental due diligence and aligns with the business concept of managing liability. You want to attain liability protections. This includes federal and state protections under programs such as the All Appropriate Inquiry, or AAI, and status as an innocent landowner or bona fide prospective purchaser. AAI stands for All Appropriate Inquiries. It is an environmental assessment process that must be conducted no more than 180 days to property acquisition and sometimes up to a year. It helps secure liability protection and eligibility for EPA grants. You have an environmental professional conduct or update phase 1. You also want to do it because the government may just require it. Some sites are subject to regulations requiring assessments before reuse. And finally, assessments are required in most cases before you can use an EPA grant funding for cleanup or redevelopment. Next slide. These next two slides are charts that EPA has created for assessing and planning for what you can apply for and at what point you can apply for it. So this first chart shows you is an eligibility chart for multiple application. This is a great tool when an entity is considering to apply for more than one grant. For instance, an entity may apply for both assessment and cleanup funding for different sites in the same application cycle. You can use this chart to cross-check whether your entity type aligns with specific grant requirements. Refer to it early in the application planning process to confirm eligibility before you invest too much time in the application. Next slide. This next slide it provides information as site eligibility for existing grant recipients. This graphic is designed to help you understand what types of grants you may be eligible to apply for based on what you have already. So, for example, if your organization currently holds a cleanup grant, this chart helps clarify whether you're eligible to apply for an assessment grant. According to the chart, you can apply as long as your existing grant is progressing appropriately and does not overlap in purpose or site focus. It's also important to note, as was previously discussed with our other presenters, it's important that you have checked your drawdown rate. You must have in some cases drawn down at least 70% of the existing grant. Example, if you receive $500,000, you should have spent at least $350,000 to reapply. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Katie.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I'm hoping my internet holds up. It's been kind of shady. So I'm going to talk a bit about making sure that you meet the threshold criteria. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one thing that you can do to get started, which has been the theme of the webinar so far, is to go ahead and check last year's guidelines. So that would be for fiscal year 2025. Not much changes between year to year, so please take a look at those guidelines to give you a sense of what you can go ahead and start preparing for. Because, like I say, most of that content stays the same. There are differences in the threshold criteria for each type of grant, the ones that have been covered and addressed so far. So you just want to pay attention to that again. And then when the actual fiscal year 26 grant guidelines are released in the fall, then you can confirm and look to your tab provider, because we will be highlighting changes from last year to this year. But again, great way to go ahead and get started. And there are numerous criteria that you must meet, and a document to make sure that you help meet all the criteria. The applicants for cleanup grants and multi-purpose grants in particular have numerous site eligibility criteria to make sure they meet. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when it comes to all grants, the threshold criteria makes sure that each applicant is eligible to actually receive an EPA Brownfield grant. The criteria is set up as pass-fail, and it's based on certain requests of information in the coming slides that I'm going to be covering. So the information, again, make sure the EPA reviewers are taking a look to make sure that you have provided that information so far, and if it does, again, it passes and it moves forward, or it fails and it does not go forward. So only those applications that fail are actually going to be approved. This is why it's so important. And some feedback that one of our EPA project officers last year wanted to make sure we really highlight is to double check your work. Is once you've actually submitted your application, you cannot pull it back and make any edits. So put a few sets of eyes on it. That's what your tab provider is here for. We can be another set of eyes for you. We can't write it, but we're happy to give you, again, another look at your application. So please be mindful and pay close attention to that threshold criteria, because once that deadline passes, you cannot submit it to the EPA. And so make sure the information is provided along with the grant narrative. And once you have actually submitted your application, you'll know within 15 calendar days if you are not eligible. Sometimes the EPA will reach out to you to let you know what may be missing. They try to be pretty thoughtful about that, so you want to make sure your contact information is up to date, and you may have a chance to make some modifications, but I don't think that's always common, and you wouldn't want to count on that. So be prepared. Next slide. Thank you. So when it comes to assessment grants, you need a letter from the Environmental State Agency acknowledging that the plans that you plan to conduct the assessment activities. And this is saying for fiscal year 25, but for this coming year, of course, it would be fiscal year 26. So you need to have that letter, and it does need to be the current year. You cannot say, oh, well, I tried to apply last year, I was not successful, let me just resubmit the letter dated last year. That does not work. They can just do a quick update, and they're happy to do it. If you need any information or you would like some help facilitating that conversation with your state environmental agency, please reach out to your tab provider. We would be happy to let you know or to help with that conversation. And so if you're applying for multiple grants, you only need one letter, but you do have to attach a copy of that letter with your application. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this is for cleanup grant. There's very little information on this slide, but it is very important. So really, I'm just highlighting that later on in the conversation in this webinar, you're going to learn more about the requirements for site characterization, those requirements for a cleanup grant. So look for that. That's coming. Again, you do need to have your letter from, have all your criteria and information confirmed and up to date. But again, please pay attention to what needs to be included in the threshold criteria because cleanup grants do have some extra steps to them. Next slide, please. All right, so now you want to make sure you determine that the scope of the grant funds covers what you're going for in your actual work under the grant if you do receive it. Next slide, please. So when it comes to multi-purpose grants, I apologize. I definitely should have flipped these slides. So on the next slide, you're going to see about assessment, but multi-purpose grants do cover almost anything that you could do with an assessment or a cleanup grant. And that includes conducting brownfield inventories and then prioritizing those sites, some site reuse planning, the community engagement that's important to make sure you're including the neighborhood to understand what they would like to see in that particular area. Environmental site assessments, cleanup planning, design, and permitting. Design is probably not as heavy here. Actually, hold that thought. That would be for cleanup. Ignore me there. Cleanup planning, design, and permitting. Contractor procurement, cleanup of one or more sites, and then it also can cover participant support costs such as a community liaison. That last bullet is relatively new. So, hopefully that'll be something that is maintained in this coming year for the grant criteria. But again, it's a newer thing, which is pretty helpful to have. Next slide, please. Assessment grants. So again, multi-purpose grants functions to help you do the actual assessment and the cleanup of one or more sites. When it comes to the assessment grants or the work that could be done under that grant, or again, the multi-purpose grant can include brownfield inventories, prioritizing those sites, your phase 1 and phase 2 site assessments, monitoring activities, community engagement, site-specific cleanup plans, brownfield reuse plans, and as well as travel and training. So that's always a good opportunity. There are two types of assessment grants, as you learned about earlier. There's area-wide and coalition, but both of those will allow you to do site reuse assessments, market studies, infrastructure evaluations, community health assessments, site disposition strategies, visioning, revitalization plans, and resource roadmaps. The EPA has a really good site that I would encourage you to take a look at that allows you to see some of these eligible planning activities that are highlighted with these bullets here. So again, I would encourage you to take a look at that. Next slide. For cleanup grants, eligible uses would be the direct cost for actual programmatic grant management, and that includes the program reporting, cleanup oversight, as well as environmental monitoring. And a portion of the grant can be used to purchase environmental insurance, health monitoring, to make sure you are keeping an eye on the extent that that cleanup is in fact preventing the human exposure, cleanup planning, design, and permitting. This is the one where I misspoke earlier. Design, again, probably should not be as heavy of a portion of your budget for the cleanup grant, but some of that may be necessary to kind of complement or actually follow up with some of the work that you've already identified, maybe with a previous assessment grant. So again, because these are so competitive, design probably shouldn't be as big of a focus here, but it is something that could be covered. Contractor procurement, and certainly cleaning up one or more sites. Next slide, please. All right. Thanks, everyone, and good luck.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm going to have to do this without my video because I keep dropping off. So please excuse that. You won't get to see my face. Sorry. Anyway, okay. Working with your community during the grant writing process. This is really one of my most favorite places to work with the grant and the community. And this is our transition into one of the most critical pieces of your application, working with your community during the grant writing process. Your community engagement and planning for it is essential, not only with the grant writing process itself, but once you receive the grant, you need to continue your involvement with the community. EPA wants to see that your project is rooted in the needs and input of those who live near or are affected by the brownfield site. We will go over what meaningful engagement looks like, how to align with community goals, and what's required for each grant type. So let's get into the community connection. Next slide. Okay, community engagement. Again, EPA wants to see involvement from relevant local organizations, groups, and entities, those who reflect or represent the community where the brownfield project is located. It's never too soon to begin outreach. Early engagement can shape the project and the proposal in meaningful ways. Everybody is saying on here, start your process early, and that includes your community engagement as well. You want to involve stakeholders and community representatives in the decision-making process. Invite them to provide input and be a part of early conversations. If an organization becomes a part of the project and the application, define the role of each group and/or individual that they will play throughout the brownfield project. Formalize the relationship. You can do this through MOUs or letters of support or agreements. This will definitely strengthen your application. And beyond meeting EPA requirements early, and active community engagement has other key benefits. It helps build awareness and understanding of the project. It can uncover barriers that could slow or derail your project. And it enlists community leaders who can champion the effort throughout the process. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to go into the consideration of involving community vision, wants, and needs. You want to ensure your proposed brownfield project is aligned with the broader vision and priorities of the community. Your application should clearly connect the project to local or regional plans. This could include local government general plans, master plans, or a CEDS, known as a Community Engagement Development Strategy. EPA values projects located in high priority areas such as community gateways, your downtown areas, historic districts, or underserved neighborhoods. It's important to identify community stakeholders and describe how you collaborate with them. This includes how you will share information and how they can help with the implementation. If you're unsure how to identify sites that align with community goals or need help verifying site eligibility, remember to contact your tab for free support and giving you the answers you need. This is your opportunity to really show that the project fits the bigger picture and reflects what the community actually wants and needs. You know, the Brownfields programs are all about reuse and redevelopment of sites. It's not just about getting the grant and applying it. It's about reuse and redevelopment that's going to best benefit your community. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the different involvement requirements of the grant from EPA. We'll start with the assessment grant. You need to consider who will participate in the project committee, especially if you intend to identify additional sites using assessment funding. EPA likes to see that a steering committee or an advisory group is in place. It can be a steering committee, it can be a project committee, advisory group, however you want to term it. It's important to have a group that represents your community and can provide expand capacity to your grant and its application. These individuals or organizations help guide the assessment process and reflect local perspectives. Again, when applicable, ensure MOUs or agreements are in place and include this with your application when appropriate. Community involvement in this stage is essential because it informs which sites get assessed, how the work is phased, and how results are communicated. Including this detail in your grant application signals to the EPA that your community voices will be central throughout the life cycle of the grant. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so now we have the involvement of your community as it relates to the cleanup grant. This is a little bit more specific and detailed as to what you need to do before you apply so that you retain your eligibility. So these are all the key public engagement steps required for cleanup grant applications. The centerpiece of these requirements is the public meeting, which must be held no later than 2 weeks prior to your grant application. If you can do that sooner, you're going to be in a much better place, because I believe in Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. In 2 weeks, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. So try and get your public meeting done way before 2 weeks prior to the grant submittal. The meeting must include a presentation of both your draft application and the APCA, or is better known as Assessment of Brownfield Cleanup Alternatives. The APCA is a document that summarizes the contamination on the site, evaluates different cleanup options, and justifies your proposed remedy. It demonstrates that you've thought through alternatives and are making an informed, protective, and feasible decision. Your public notification requirements are very specific. You must post the meeting notice in a publicly accessible location and allow adequate time for the community to respond. 30 days is probably not too long to post those notices. Think about your city websites, bulletin boards, newspapers, and other agency opportunities that will be provided to post your meeting. Important considerations when you're planning to connect with your community is to ensure barriers to the community participation are addressed, including your location. Make sure your venue is ADA accessible and welcoming. Consider language access needs, especially in multilingual communities. Other barriers you should include in your planning and to address them might include childcare, transportation, and timing of the meeting. You want to ensure the highest level of community participation as possible when you're planning this meeting. And also very important, you need to document everything, record attendance, capture comments, and explain how incorporated public feedback into your final application. EPA reviewers will look for a strong, transparent process that reflects community concerns and collaboration. We can't stress enough how important it is to connect with your community in the application process and also after you receive the grant, hopefully. Next slide. Determining your team. And again, this is your project team, your advisory committee, however you want to term it. If you're new to brownfield funding or this is your first application, I can't underscore how important it is to start building your team early. Have a solid team in place demonstrates to EPA that, one, you have the capacity to manage the grant. Or you might go to the next slide, I'm sorry. You want to have a solid team in place demonstrates to EPA that you have the capacity to manage the grant. You're serious about long-term implementation, and you've already built internal or external systems for project oversight and executions. Determine areas of need to manage the grant in the Brownfields program if awarded. This includes roles such as a project manager, a grant administrator, a technical expert, and community engagement lead. The earlier your team is assembled, the more strategic and successful your application and eventual project will be. If your organization has coordinated and managed teams before, perhaps for other grants or redevelopment efforts, you're in a strong position to build on those relationships and assemble a team quickly. But again, even if you've had the experience in the past, it's not too early to start getting that team together and make sure it's solid. Next slide. Developing, oh, go back. We're not going to introduce Wayne yet. Developing your organizational structure. Next slide. There we go. This slide focuses on the importance of building an organizational structure and demonstrates capacity, a key factor in receiving and successfully managing a Brownfields grant. Why is this important? Well, EPA wants to know your organization has the structure in place to effectively manage your grant and the federal funds that are being provided for you and your organization to carry out the technical work. A well-defined structure also allows your team to respond quickly to challenges, communicate clearly, and deliver on commitments. How do you build this capacity? You start by identifying internal roles. Who will manage the grant? Who will oversee the contractors? Who will handle financial tracking and reporting and lead community outreach? If gaps exist, plan to bring in expertise from consultants, other organizations, regional partners, or look at your interagency agreements. You must demonstrate both programmatic capability and an organizational structure that can manage all aspects of the grant. If your organization has led previous projects, consider leveraging existing team members or partnerships that have worked well in the past. And now I'll hand it off to Wayne.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hope everybody can hear me. Good morning, good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. Next, we're going to review some important grant application requirements for the different grant types, the multipurpose, assessment, and cleanup, in that order. But they may not seem like they belong in that order, but we'll talk about them in that order. Then we'll discuss several of the critical tasks of these applications that you should begin soon. Next slide, please. So multipurpose grant site requirements. As with most grant types, a multipurpose application must identify one target area, which may include one or more towns, parts of towns, districts, census tracts, or other defined areas. Carefully define your target area soon. Remember, you're telling a compelling story about the burden of brownfields on your community, and the selection of your target area will be important to that story. Excuse me. Within your selected target area, you must propose 3 main multipurpose activities. You must have at least one phase 2 site investigation. You must propose to remediate at least one site, and that site must meet the EPA definition of a brownfield, and a multipurpose grant application also must discuss revitalization planning. EPA wants to see that you have a plan for revitalizing the target area that must include a feasible reuse strategy for at least one site. These are all decisions you should make well before the requests for applications are issued. For priority sites where you will propose to conduct assessment activities, you must describe how you will obtain access. This was mentioned earlier. If you can say that you already obtained written access from the owners of your priority sites, that would be great. At the very least, though, you must demonstrate you have a viable means of obtaining access. Now, a few words about the importance of site ownership with respect to grants used for cleanup. These ownership requirements will also apply to cleanup grants, which we will discuss shortly, so keep them in mind. I won't go over them again, but these apply again to any cleanup sites. You must own the site at which you are proposing the cleanup before this grant application is submitted this fall. Or you must be able to demonstrate that you have rights that are considered functionally equivalent to ownership. This alternative to ownership can be a complicated question. So for our purposes today, just let's say that if you will not own the site, but you still wish to apply for a cleanup grant for that site, you should consult with EPA as soon as possible to iron out the details of any alternative agreement. Otherwise, it's likely your site will not be eligible for a grant. If you do not own the site, but you do intend to acquire it before the grant applications are submitted, and it's surprising how many applicants do this, they do acquire the site in time for the fall, you must show that you meet the definition of a bona fide prospective purchaser, which was mentioned earlier. This generally means that you must conduct a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And you still have time to do this, not much, but you do have a little bit of time to have a phase 1 conducted prior to acquiring the property in time for this year's grant season. But I think it's pretty obvious you should do this right away. 2 more quick words of caution here about phase 1s. First, as we mentioned, a phase 1 has a short shelf life, only about 6 to 12 months. Older phase 1s will not give you a bona fide prospective purchaser status, needed to be eligible for an EPA grant. So you may need to do a fresh phase 1 before you acquire the brownfield property. And second, let's say you have a copy of a phase 1 that was performed on the property, but on behalf of a different entity. In most instances, you cannot use it because a phase 1 needs to be performed on behalf of the grant applicant. And again, it's likely it would be outdated anyway. When in doubt about all appropriate inquiry and its effect on your eligibility of your site, ask EPA, ask your state agency brownfield experts, or your regional tab provider for assistance. Next slide, please. Assessment grant site requirements, compared to the multi-purpose and cleanup grants, site eligibility requirements for a community-wide assessment grant are relatively simple, but it's still advisable to start soon on meeting these requirements. First, for an assessment grant, you must identify your geographic boundary. This is the broad region within which you'll conduct the assessment activities. It might be if you're a town, it might be the boundaries of your town or county or what have you. Next, you identify the target area in which you will focus your efforts. The target area will contain the initial priority sites that you have identified in your application. Your selected target area should tell a compelling story of the burden brownfields have on your community. And you must then identify at least one priority site, 2 or 3 is better, where you will conduct assessment activities. Pay close attention to the ranking criteria and try to select sites that will maximize your score. And again, you must describe how you will obtain access to the priority sites for assessment. Next slide, please. It was mentioned earlier some of the challenges of putting together a coalition assessment grant application. It's more complicated than for a typical community-wide assessment grant. You must list the coalition members and identify each member's geographic boundary. Within each member's geographic boundary, you must identify target areas and priority sites. You must identify at least one priority site within each member's geographic boundary. So if you have 4 members in your coalition, you need to have each of those 4 members have at least one priority site identified. And remember, target areas cannot overlap. And finally, as with other grants, you must describe how you will obtain access to the priority sites. Doing all of this within a framework of multiple coalition partners takes more time than you would think, so don't wait to start this process. Next slide. Cleanups grant site requirements. As I mentioned, most requirements for cleanup grant applications are similar to those for the multi-purpose grant application portions that apply to the cleanup portion of those applications. A cleanup grant will provide funding for remediation at 1 or more brownfield sites, and these sites must be within your defined target area. As with the cleanup site under the multi-purpose grant application, the applicant must own the sites targeted for cleanup at the time of application, again, unless EPA approves a different ownership agreement. So everything I mentioned regarding the ownership, the challenges of the ownership under the cleanup portion of the multi-purpose grant application also applies to a cleanup grant. And as always, talk early with EPA if you have any questions about site eligibility. Next slide, please. And speaking of communicating with EPA, this is a common theme today. When in doubt, ask EPA. Before you do so, please refer to the wealth of information and resources EPA has developed and posted online, including previous years' requests for applications. Those are still available. They'll be a little different this year, but many of the components will be the same. And there's over 100 pages now of detailed answers to frequently asked questions. Those are also available, and likely you can find answers to a lot of your questions. EPA will also be holding regional how-to meetings in the coming months. And your TAB programs have also developed guides and tools to assist your grant writing efforts. However, even with all this information, you may still have unique situations and questions that require specific answers. And fortunately, right now, you still have time. From now until the requests for applications are issued in September, EPA staff can provide excellent detailed guidance. After the RFAs are issued, however, the requests for applications are issued in September, EPA can only answer questions regarding threshold criteria and task and budget eligibility criteria. EPA will not meet with individual applicants after the RFAs are issued or provide advice to applicants on how to respond to ranking criteria. This fact alone is strong incentive to start preparing your grant application early. So if you have questions, you can get answers. This is a critical factor some people don't pay attention to, and they get, by the time the RFAs come out, they don't have time to get their answers. One reminder here, though, your TAB providers can provide this assistance even after the RFAs are issued. But even there, you will get more assistance from the TAB teams on your grant applications if you reach out to us early. We get pretty busy once the RFAs are issued between September and November. Next slide, please. Specific grant requirements to start preparing now. There are a few specific things you should start simply because they take time and they may depend on getting information from others, and you may not control that timeline. Next slide. So as it was mentioned, creating a coalition for a coalition assessment grant, this is definitely something to do ahead of time. You must get the approval of all coalition members. Each member may need to get approval of their own city council or county board of commissioners or other governing body. Develop your coalition and obtain a written agreement from each member soon. And you need to secure the support of community partners. As you read through the grant information about coalition grants, you'll see that community partners play a key role. And as Cheryl mentioned, this is a key thing. Remember, there are strict requirements for coalitions. Carrie already discussed these. I won't go over them again, but be aware that they exist and that they will take time to address. Next slide, please. Considerations for applying for a cleanup grant. You must demonstrate you've got sufficient assessment. That sufficient assessment has been completed at your site to move on with cleanup. This generally means that a phase 1 and phase 2 assessment have been completed. But be careful here because a phase 2 investigation may have been done, but it still may not have been sufficient to plan the remediation. For example, a phase 2 may have focused only on a particular release area and did not investigate all of the releases that you intend to clean up. We sometimes see that where people say, well, I've got this phase 2, I'm ready to go for the cleanup, and the phase 2 didn't address any of the things that they're actually trying to clean up. So a significant data gap like this may make it impossible to plan and budget for cleanup, which may keep you from being awarded a grant. If your project will involve hazardous building materials abatement, like asbestos or lead paint, rather than something subsurface in the soil or groundwater, you may not need what's called a phase 2 investigation, but you should have something that's analogous in the hazardous building material arena, a complete inventory of hazardous building materials that will allow you to proceed with abatement of those materials. If you are not sure if you can demonstrate sufficient assessment has already been completed to proceed with cleanup, reach out right away to environmental professionals or to your TAB provider and request a data gap analysis. Or sometimes you may be able to ask your state or federal agency personnel that are familiar with the site. If necessary, you still have enough time this spring and summer to conduct additional investigations to fill critical data gaps and prepare a strong application for a cleanup grant. Obviously, if such additional investigation is necessary, you'll need to start that work right away. Next slide, please. There was mention earlier, and I won't go through all the details of it, the cleanup grant applications also required a document called it's a draft assessment of brownfield cleanup alternatives, or ABCA. The ABCA, as mentioned, shows EPA that the proposed site cleanup and the budget for that cleanup are justified. If EPA assessment grants were previously used to investigate the site, if there was an assessment grant that covered this site, there's a good chance that a draft ABCA was already prepared. If not, you still have time to prepare one. And if your organization does not have in-house professionals capable of preparing the ABCA, you may hire a consultant or seek assistance from community partners that do have the capacity to help. Next slide, please. Just as the ABCA justifies the technical approach for your cleanup, the budget in your application must justify the amount of money you are requesting. And again, preparing a cleanup budget takes time. And this is more for cleanup grants than for anything else. This is the thing that really takes time. Your budget for a cleanup must be thorough and reasonable with clear justifications of costs. You also must identify other resources that will be used to fill in any funding gaps. EPA wants to know that you can leverage their grant if necessary by drawing on other resources. So if you know that there are other pools of money that you might be able to access that may be able to fill in a shortfall during the project, reach out to those the people who are the keepers of those funds and find out if you can get access to that money and mention it in your application. The grant application provides a budget template. Use it. Absolutely use it. Applicants sometimes try to use a different format, maybe because they already have it. They have a spreadsheet that somebody gave them and said, this is the layout, this is the how the budget is going to go for the cleanup. But doing that and not using the template runs the risk of confusing a reviewer who may miss something and not award you all of the available points. So take the time to make sure that your grant, that the funding budget that you have is in the format that is recommended. A cleanup cost. Excuse me? Okay. Almost done. A cleanup cost estimate prepared by an engineer or environmental professional is best. Next slide, please. Just a few notes here about resources to help you write the grant application. Next slide. So we don't have time to go through all of the available grant writing tools and resources, and we strongly encourage, as it was mentioned at the outset, encourage you to become familiar with all of the information available from EPA and the TAB programs. But here are just a few places to start. Early on, check out EPA's webinars and how-to guides. Note that each provides links to other resources that can help you with particular elements of your application. And I mentioned the frequently asked questions and things like that. These are treasure trove of information. Each TAB program has its own resources and provides application reviewing services upon request. The Kansas State University TAB program has developed the TAB EZ online grant writing tool. This is a software program, templates that will guide you through the sections of the application. Importantly, the TAB EZ tool is updated 1 week after the request for applications is published in September. So any changes from previous years will be addressed in the new version. And the KSU TAB staff are available if you get stuck or have any difficulty using the TAB EZ tool. There are also grant narrative templates available online or upon request from your TAB providers. Bottom line, work with your TAB providers and take advantage of our wide range of tools, all of which, of course, are free. Next slide, please. And lastly here, a note on data mining for your narrative. There's a lot of information that has to be pulled together for your narrative to make a compelling case for your project. Checking many of these boxes in your application requires research that you can and you should start early. Start with collecting your demographic and health data. A lot of this data will come from the American Community Survey, from the US Census Bureau. And there are state-specific resources often for health data that can be found on your TAB's website, links for which that can be found on your TAB's website. You cannot alter demographic or health data. They are what they are, but you can adjust the boundaries of your geographic area or target areas so that the statistics tell a more compelling story and help your application score higher. So gathering these data early will show you where you can improve and allow you enough time to make these changes. And I think that's it for my section of today's webinar. Thank you very much. I'll hand it back to Carrie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wayne. Yes, definitely wanted to underscore what Wayne said, that as TAB providers, that we can provide assistance with reviewing your grant before submittal. So let's discuss some logistics for actually submitting your application. There's a framework of the overall grant submittal process here on the slide. You're going to start with making an account on login.gov, registering your entity at sam.gov, receiving a unique entity identifier, registering in grants.gov, and submitting required federal forms. Next slide. So login.gov is a secure sign-in service used by the GSA for accessing sam.gov and other government services. When you try to sign into a participating agency website, it'll prompt you to create an account. So on login.gov, they manage your username and password. And then you go to sam.gov to register your entity, receive a unique entity identifier, or renew your entity, because it's important to renew your sam.gov registration at least 90 days before it expires. Next slide. So SAM stands for System for Award Management. Registering for sam.gov is needed to work as a federal contractor or receive business or nonprofit grants. Your SAM registration will be valid for a year. So you want to go to sam.gov to register your entity, check to see if your account is still active, and receive a unique entity identifier, or you want to renew your entity if it has lapsed. So renewing your sam.gov registration is important, again, at least 90 days before it expires. But I would recommend checking it whenever is most convenient for you. You want to probably give more buffer time than that 90 days. And then for sam.gov registration help, you can use the link there to contact the Federal Service Desk, or FSD. Next slide. So you must register to submit your application electronically. If your registration is not complete and active, you will not be able to submit your grant application. Registration is done through federal government portals, as I've mentioned, and this process is not unique to EPA. It's used across multiple federal agencies, and although EPA provides detailed instructions in its RFAs on how to register, EPA does not control the process. In very limited instances, if you don't have the technical capabilities to apply electronically through grants.gov because of limited or no internet access, which prevents you from being able to upload the required application materials on grants.gov, you must contact EPA and follow instructions on obtaining a limited exception. However, obtaining such exception is very rare. I would assume, since you're watching this as a webinar online, you can submit your application online, but if you're aware of communities that are unable to do so, they would have to go through this limited exception process. Note what's in red text here, that this process can take more than a month to complete. And usually based on past precedent, there's like 6 weeks between when the RFA is announced and the grant is due. So again, you want to make sure that these are the things that you're starting now early before the fall. So again, just want to reiterate, you need to have an active sam.gov account, a UEI, be registered in grants.gov, and also have the e-business point of contact designate an authorized organization representative, or OAR, in grants.gov. Again, you can go onto the EPA's website and look at previous RFAs, which can provide you some instructions on registering in grants.gov and sam.gov. Next slide. So again, the EPA requires a UEI number in its grant applications. This unique entity identifier is a unique 12-character alphanumeric identifier that uniquely identifies entities that do business with the federal government. You'll receive a UEI if your organization is registered in sam.gov. Again, this can take more than a month, so you want to make sure you start this early. Also, if you have previous experience with the DUNS number, note that this was phased out in 2022. So DUNS is no longer valid for federal award information. Next slide. Now that you're registered with login.gov and sam.gov and you have your UEI, now you can apply through grants.gov. First, you need to create a username and password, complete an AOR or Authorized Organization Representative profile. The OAR must be the person who submits the application in grants.gov. Become an authorized AOR by requesting approval from your organization's e-business point of contact or e-biz POC. You can and should track the status of your AOR in grants.gov to make sure it's being processed. Again, thank you for your patience with all of these acronyms and things like that. And your TAB providers on this call today are able to assist you understanding what each of these are and make sure you understand what needs to happen prior to the RFA to make sure that you're able to successfully submit. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Roxanne for a wrap up.
Thanks, Carrie. So before we wrap up completely, I want to make sure you know about our upcoming follow-up webinar, Grant or No Grant, Let's Navigate Your Next Move. It's happening May 22nd at 12 p.m. Whether you've been awarded an EPA Brownfield grant or not, this session will walk you through the next steps, offering guidance for both scenarios. So if you're wondering what to do after you've received a grant or how to proceed if you didn't, this is the perfect opportunity to get more insights. You can register now through the UConn website, and we can drop that link in the chat. There is also lots of grant writing workshops happening in your respective TAB regions. So I recommend reaching out to your TAB provider to find out if there's going to be any grant workshops in your state or in your region so that you can attend those later in the summer or early fall. Next. So taking a quick glance at the map, it's like your little TAB cheat sheet for anyone who wants to reach out based on your location. Each region has its very own provider, like I mentioned. The contact info is right there on the slide. Again, you'll be provided with the slides. And if you accidentally email the wrong one, I'm sure they'll kindly point you in the right direction. So no harm, no foul. Next. All right, so if you haven't already, now's your chance. Take a moment to click the link in the chat or scan the QR code with your phone. We really want your feedback on today's webinar. Promise it'll only take a second. Your input helps us, and it makes an impact, and it helps make these sessions better for and more useful for you as we go forward. So please don't make us beg and fill out the slides. Next. All right, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope you found this session helpful. And now it's your turn. We have about 5 minutes to answer any questions we have not answered as we have gone along. And I will open it up to the speakers to chime in. If there's any questions in the chat that are of interest, just pop them in the chat and I can read them out. And if we run out of time, again, you can just reach out to your TAB provider. As of right now, I'm not seeing any new questions, but we can wait here for a couple minutes to see if we do. Otherwise, thank you all for joining. Okay, I do have a question. It says, can a brownfield grant be used to pay for the wrap? Does anyone else want to take that, Katie? Oh.
I can probably take that. Yes, the short answer is yes. You can use assessment grants, planning grants for preparing a wrap. It is. You can do it with a cleanup grant as well.
It says, would you please review potential grant award amounts? So we do not have the list of the grant award amounts from that are going to be posted for this year, but we do have the estimated amounts from last year. I do not have them memorized. Does anybody else have a general idea of what each of them were, or we can reach out to you to let you know. Those are also located on the EPA website.
Yeah, I'll put a link to the last year's resources in the chat right now, so folks can review.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Next question, can an organization with a current cleanup grant apply for a new multipurpose grant without spending down a certain percentage of the cleanup grant? Multipurpose grants were not included in the table since they were not offered last year. It is my understanding that if you apply for a multi-purpose grant and you currently have a cleanup grant, there is a spend down requirement percentage. I don't know what that is though. Does anybody else know that offhand? Otherwise, I can get back to you, Addie. Okay. And then, go ahead.
Roxanne, it'll really, to answer Eddie's questions,
Maggie.
it'll depend how they come out. Yeah, hi, sorry, Maggie with KSU. We won't know until the guidelines come out. They could change that requirement. It could be the same.
Yeah. The next question says, I may have missed it, but are Alaska Native villages eligible for these funding opportunities? I think in the past they weren't, but there was talk of that changing.
I'd say same answer. We haven't heard anything different yet. Hopefully, yes, that does change, but we don't have any information to indicate that at this point.
I know these are not all the best answers.
We're in
We
limbo just like everybody else.
Yeah.
We know a lot, but we don't know everything.
It says, does the 70% drawdown have to be completed prior to submittal or prior to the award? Because that's a large time gap to be spending. I believe it has to be done prior to submitting your application. Is that correct, Maggie?
That is correct.
Yes, okay.
Can I qualify that a little bit?
Say that again?
There's normally actually a deadline in the RFP that is actually before the application is actually due. So it's not actually the due date of the application that you have to do the spend down. There's normally a date in the NOFA that specifies that.
Okay.
Yes,
You know, the charts that were presented in the slide presentation that I did on eligibility, there are two charts that EPA provides, and one of them is the site eligibility for existing grant recipients. So if you refer to that chart, it can answer the question as it relates to the multi-use grant and eligibility to apply for an assessment grant. So that's in the slide deck.
Thanks, Cheryl. And with that, I believe we're out of time. However, if you submitted a question, please pop your email in there. We can get back with you, or email us with your question. We are going to keep all of them on record, and we can still reach out to you and answer your question. Thank you all so much for joining, and please join us on May 22nd for the follow-up. Have a good afternoon.